taking photos of political and social change in Detroit, but definitely filming cultural change as well. And she is the Kresge Eminent Artist Award winner, just one of the most coveted, if not the most coveted award in Detroit. And it gives me great pleasure to bring you today Leni Sinclair.
Thinking about how to explain the title of A Wild and Crazy Life, I thought of what could I talk about, and I was toying with the idea of just presenting a list of all the places I lived in Detroit since I came here in 1959, and it turns out I moved at least 30 times. If that's not crazy, I don't know what is. In Germany, there's like a folkloric formula. If you have to move 3 times, that's the equivalent of burning down a house, or your house burning down. The upheaval when you have to move 3 times. So, you know, by that token, I burned down about 10 houses in Detroit alone. That's how many times I moved, even 1 time, 3 times in the same year. Sometimes because of crime, sometimes because of maybe it's cheaper somewhere else, whatever. But that's crazy. And the other story I was thinking about, talking about, is how I liberated myself after a marriage gone bad. How did I manage to survive and become myself again? And that story involves taking a vacation. Like I was sent on a vacation when the commune, when everybody was down on me and I was very sick and I didn't know what to do with myself, and I was not being productive enough, that the commune said, you need a vacation. So they sent me away for 4 days. I was camping out at Sanilac State Park. And at that time, it was a clothing optional camp. I had a little pup tent, and I went there. And for 4 days, I was lying bare-ass naked in the sand dunes and reading my diaries that I kept since I was 16 or 15. Anyway, it wasn't real diaries, but it was notes about my life before meeting John Sinclair. And lying there in the sand dune, bare-ass naked, day after day, I found myself again. And the great actress Mae West said one time, darling, keep a diary. Someday it will keep you. And that's what happened after I read about myself and my life, before I got down and out and depressed and down, being somebody I did hardly recognize myself. I found myself reading diaries from my previous life, and that's what saved me, you know. So that gave me the strength to finally say no to the bullshit and walk away and never regret it, you know. So there's another story I wanted to talk about, and that has to do with the CIA and the wiretap and the Nixon and all that. But that's on the back burner too right now. I can talk about it if you all want to know about it. But then I thought about one aspect of my crazy life And that's how I went to Woodstock. That's a story I've never told, and it's about time. uh, when Woodstock came around, my husband, John Sinclair, had just been sentenced and taken away for 9.5 to 10 years for possession of 2 marijuana cigarettes. So, Abby Hoffman was a friend of ours, the hippies were friends of ours, and Abby Hoffman and his fellow,
White Panthers.
a fellow youth, yuppie, I mean,
Yes.
Youth International yippies, you know.
Yeah.
They went to the promoter of Woodstock and extracted $10,000 from them to devote to the presence of the movement at Woodstock. Okay, they wanted, the radical, the anti-war, the people have be there, or they would be allowed to be there. And so Abby Hoffman sent us $200 for the White Panther Party to have a presence at Woodstock and let people know that John Sinclair had just been sentenced to 10 years for something everybody else was doing there too. I thought it would be good to educate people that this happened in Michigan. So we used Mike Minnick's VW van, I think, and there was 5 of us, we drove from Ann Arbor to Woodstock. Now Woodstock was laid out, you'll see the picture of the big, huge crowd of 500,000 people strong there lying in the mud. Well, they had arranged and built something called Movement Village, which was up the hill and through the woods on a path they made with some boards through the woods into this little opening in the woods. And there were all these booths put up by the people. The White Panther Party, we had to build our own booths to distribute our literature, and there was all kinds of organizations who had their booth there. But the problem was it was so far away from the masses, people didn't go there,
Oh, wow.
It was like they bought us off, they just, they gave us money to shut up, so. And then I sat around backstage for like 2 nights or something. Nobody would let us say anything on the microphone about John Sinclair. And later on I found out that all the performers at Woodstock had to sign a rider saying not to allow any political speeches on stage, and so nobody would let us speak, except the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. But before that came to pass, there was this incident of Abby Hoffman one night. You might all know about this. One night he was just high on acid, and he was so frustrated. He had promised us that we would get some help to publicize our case, and nobody would let us. Then that one night when the Who was playing, Abby jumped on stage and took the mic from Pete Townsend and started talking about John Sinclair. So Pete Townsend took his guitar and smashed him over the head, and he took off, Oh yeah. And then after that, I wasn't there when that happened, but after that he came to this place, in Movement Village, and one of the booths was Paul Krasno's booth, who had a magazine called The Realist. You remember that? Anyway, the booth with The Realist was still half full of bundles of The Realist that couldn't distribute anywhere, and people didn't come there. And I was sleeping on top of the wheel list by the time Abby come in and said, "Oh man, I think I just blew it." And then he told us a story about what he did. And then after that, we couldn't say another word. We were slinking around with our tail between our legs. Nobody could even mention the name John Sinclair after that. And then on the way home, so, okay, to get to Movement Village, they had cleared some of the woods, but they had left the stumps of the trees still there. So as we drove towards Movement Village, the underside of this van got damaged. So we were there like for 3 days, and then it was time to go leave, and the car would only work by, if you wanted to stop, you would have to pull a string and pull the gas pedal up so it wouldn't slam into something. And so instead of driving back to Detroit like that, we decided to stop in Hackensack, New Jersey, because one of the guys with us had a friend who was a mechanic. We were going to get it fixed. And as we were driving through Hackensack, New Jersey in the middle of the night, all of a sudden there was a police car behind us. Maybe because we were driving too slow, and stopped us. And Pun was driving, and apparently Pun was panicked, and he had a little weed in a film can, and he threw it out the window to the grass, and they stopped it, they found it. They arrested all 5 of us, okay. Back then, weed was real scarce, okay? And I had saved 3 vouchers for the way back, okay? And then I had them, when we got stopped by the police, I had them stuffed in some Kleenex in my underwear. Well, wouldn't you know, as soon as they came, this lady policewoman, I had handcuffs on, and this lady police woman searched me and found my 3 vouchers, and so I had a case of possession of marijuana. And when the police looked at the van, it was full of literature like Free John Sinclair, John Sinclair, John Sinclair, this and that, and little copies of the wet book and this, And they thought, the police, oh man, they had the mother load of radicals here.
Oh, wow.
Put us in jail. And it was in the middle of the night, and they got the judge out of bed. He was still in his house coat and slippers. He came and sentenced each one of us to $50,000 bail, so we went to jail. Jeannie and we got bailed out the next day by the National Lawyers Guild. Somebody came from New York to help us get out, but there were 3 of the White Panthers who were with us, who had to spend 3 weeks in jail before we could get them out. But when we got arrested, when we got to the police station, and this judge came, Pun was kind of pleading with the judge, saying, please at least lower the bail for the women, because they're both pregnant and they need to be home. And it was true, I was pregnant, Jeannie wasn't, but I was pregnant with Celia at the time. But it was like too early to show, so the judge didn't believe me and the judge gave us a lecture. You women, you're always demonstrating and wanting to have equal rights. Well, I'll give you equal rights. You're not getting any lower bond. So, but then in Detroit, the newspaper, or within Ann Arbor, the newspaper had an article. John Sinclair was already in jail. Leni Sinclair's in jail. What will happen to little Sonny now? Little Sonny was our first daughter. And so my mother-in-law, Elsie, and my father-in-law, they had Sonny. They took care of our children while I went to raise some money or whatever. So, and she was talking to the reporter saying, nothing is going to happen to Sonny. She's there with us and she'll be fine. And so don't worry about her. And so anyway, so that was Woodstock. And after we left Woodstock, I had a recurring nightmare. And in this nightmare, I was walking on slats of wood that were covering the water or covering the river or creek or something, and the creek was full of skulls. That was my Woodstock experience. And I always wanted to do like a documentary, Woodstock 2, T-O-O, because there was the ugly underside of the promoters, it wasn't all sweetness and light, and the people could have starved to death, people could have gotten killed. They were so damn lucky it didn't turn into a big disaster, So, anyway, so much for that. Now, does anybody have any questions about Woodstock or anything?
How old were you when you went there?
Let's see.
That was 69.
I was born in 40, so I was 29. Yeah. Sonny was born when I was 27, and Celia, who's sitting over there helping me sell books and cards and pictures, Celia was born while John was in jail in January, following his going to jail.
Hey, Lenny, my question is, do you have photographs from Woodstock when you were there?
Oh my God.
Because I have not seen any.
I didn't go to Woodstock to take pictures.
Did you bring your
but
camera?
Of course I had a camera, and my most famous picture from Woodstock is I took a picture of this guy by the pond where we all went skinny dipping,
Yep.
And I took a picture of this guy bare naked with just the camera in his face, and he took a picture of me same way. I never knew who that was. I would love to see my pictures.
Oh.
And that picture of the naked photographer that I took made the back cover of School magazine.
Oh my
School
God.
magazine was the first sex liberation or sex positive magazine in New York, and they used that beautiful picture of this beautiful male. My claim to fame. But I didn't take any pictures on stage, none of the performers.
Did you get close enough that you could have? A lot of
No,
people there.
no, I was never close, and I never
My
was
sister
in
was
front
there
of-
too.
No, I was sitting backstage on some old equipment waiting to get a chance to speak, and it never came. And I had some disappointments. I asked Joan Baez if she would say something about John Sinclair, and she said, no, I can't support a violent revolutionary. And John Sinclair was in jail for possession of tutoring theater. So, and the other person I asked, which was disappointing because we had been friends before, was Jerry Garcia. And we've been friends ever since I played at the Grandy Ballroom. And after the show, they came to the house. We were all sitting around laughing and eating and drinking and smoking. So, but at Woodstock, when I asked Garcia backstage, would he say something about John Sinclair being in jail for 10 years? We don't support violent revolutionaries. Or something like that, like he wouldn't. But it wasn't, then I found out it wasn't their fault. It was in their contract. They were not allowed to let anybody speak. And then John was in jail, and all he could hear was the newspaper and watched TV sometimes in the mess hall or whatever, and saw all these thousands and thousands of people at Woodstock, and he was all enthusiastic about Woodstock. And then I had to dissuade him from it by our experience. It wasn't all that positive. Yeah.
Can you tell us the story how John Lennon got involved with the Free John Sinclair?
Oh, yeah, see, that's because we were friends with the Yippies, you know, and John and Yoko made friends with Jerry Rubin and Harry Hoffman and other Yippies in New York. And they told him about John Sinclair's case. And because John Lennon had a conviction for possession of marijuana in England before, he was sympathetic to what happened to John, and he sat down and wrote a song for John. It Ain't Fair, John Sinclair, you know, it's on his record. And then when he found out that we had a rally planned, the John Sinclair Freedom Rally, John and Yoko volunteered to headline it, which was a financial saver because up to that point we had maybe sold 5,000 tickets. But when John Lennon announced he was coming, it was sold out in about 2 hours, 15,000 seats. Yeah. With only $3.50 a ticket. We could have raised it and made money, but we didn't. We kept it $3.50. So, yeah. And so then they came. Before John Lennon announced, John and Yoko announced that they would come and headline the festival. Bob Seger was the headliner. It was going to be all Michigan bands, and everybody signed up, and Bob Seger signed up as the headliner. And you know, what happened is the Michigan Supreme Court had struck down the old marijuana law the day before the concert, like December 9th. And so John Sinclair would have gotten out of jail whether John Lennon came or not. But John Lennon was so ostracized and, you know, and discriminated against that he paid the price, that he paid a bitter price, you know, for doing that. Because after that, they were trying to deport him, and then they had to promise the government not to take part in any political things or any concerts like that, like John Sinclair Freedom Rally, and they dropped out. And then, you know, we know John Lennon kind of went crazy. If you can imagine escaping from England and from being followed by 1,000 teenagers every time we stepped out on the street. John and Yoko felt liberated in New York because they would walk down the street on Tompkins Square and hold hands, and nobody give a shit about them or ask them for their autograph or run after them. So they felt good being in New York, you know. And then the government telling them, oh, you cannot speak your mind, you're not welcome here, you know, shut up and go away and get drunk.
Did you spend time with them?
No, only twice we visited them after John got out, and they flew back to New York. No, they flew back to New York, and 3 days later John got out, and they were so enthusiastic, and they were so amazed at how much power they had to spring somebody out of jail. People power of rock and roll to help people find justice. So they invited us to New York twice, because after the John Sinclair Freedom Rally, they wanted to have concerts like that in about 10 or 12 different cities in America, and leave all the money in the community like they were going to do without, if, you know, so anyway, so So we went to a meeting, we met with them and talked about the problem, the project to bring this off. They were gonna use our production company that had produced the John Sinclair Freedom Rally. They were gonna use our production company to do all these other concerts, you know. But, so we had some meetings, or I had a meeting, at least one I can remember, with Leni Davis, the anti-war activist, and there was a bunch of people talking about this upcoming tour. And it turns out that I think a woman in this meeting who volunteered to take the minutes of the meeting turned out to be an undercover agent. And as soon as J. Edgar Hoover got wind of this planned concert tour, that's when he got the immigration involved and wanted to deport them. You know. And then after the hearing in New York, they decided to scrap the whole idea. And nothing ever happened afterward. So. But then I also heard some conspiracies about who killed John Lennon. It wasn't Mark David Chapman,
What?
supposedly.
Did you hear?
Oh, it was on a website from Australia that they claimed that he was really killed by the doorman of the Dakota, but the gun was thrown to Mark David Chapman's feet as if he's the one that killed him, and the doorman at the Dakota was one of the Bay of Pigs operatives. That's what it said in this story in Australia. No idea, with all the conspiracy aspect, how do you know? How do you know? Who killed Kennedy? Who killed Robert Kennedy? Who killed Martin Luther King? Who killed John Lennon? Who knows? We will never know the truth. Anyway, that's enough for now. If you want to hear some more, you can ask me. I'm going to go back to my pictures and sell some. Oh, and I wanted to let people know. I have 2 copies of this. In the 60s, we produced a magazine called Work. You know, we had the workshop, the Elvis workshop. We had a magazine called Work. We had a worksheet, everything was about work, you know, and that was possibly my influence because I was the one that mimeographed all the work and everything. But we published 5 copies of work in the 60s, and then we had a reunion in like 40-year reunion and put out another issue, and this is work number 6. And this is a very, very interesting, very interesting stories in here, especially a salute by Robert Creeley and Robin Ickley, Andrew Kodrescu, John Sinclair, James Seymour, Bill Harris, blah, 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 New Orleans. It's a whole lot of very interesting stories and reminiscence, and these are only $20, and I only have 2 copies left there.
I'll take one.
You want
They're gone.
Sold. And it's also got some photos of mine in here. And it has a long story by books. Anyway, sometimes I forget names. I had a stroke one time about 14 years ago. No, it was 14. 8 years ago. And sometimes I'm trying to remember a name and it doesn't just come right away. Britta Brooks, a minute later it comes back, this is how strokes work, I guess, But Britta Brooks was very active in organizing the reunion, and she went on the longest walk of Native Americans, like from Alcatraz to Washington D.C. Like a few years ago, when she writes about the longest walk that she went on with the people. So anyway, okay. These pictures are all mine. I just found out. And these are available too for $25 each if somebody wants to look through them. Yeah, thank you for coming. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Lenny.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's great stories. I'm glad to call you my mentor. You always was a good friend of mine for all these years. I love you, Lenny.
I love you too. That's Frank Pettis, one of the greatest photographers I know.
They agreed.
And I know a dozen photographers that are better photographers than I ever was. Like, technically, I profited from having married John Sinclair and being into jazz and music and all that stuff. That's how I would happen to be at the right place sometimes, taking the pictures that I could. But I was never a good photographer. I never studied it, and I'm not. I couldn't do a lot of things. No.